Hi friends and welcome to Scenes Recap. Today's movie opens up with a legendary fighter, Mike. He suffered a severe shoulder injury in his past fight, and his age also does not allow him to make a comeback. Mike visits his former MMA manager, Vince, and asks him to bring him back in shape for MMA fights. Vince however insists that Mike can no longer fight because of his age and his shoulder injury. Vince also reveals that Mike recently suffered 3 consecutive defeats in his last fights. Nonetheless, Mike continues to insist that Vince help him get back in the fights as he needs the money. Vince tells him that this is a business but health comes first, and adds that Mike has lost the killer instinct that can make him win the fights. Mike tries to convince him by challenging one of his fighters there. Mike starts quite well, but when he was about to get it done, he leaves his opponent while trying to signal Vince he can get back in the ring. He is shortly knocked down and defeated. After the experience, Mike is convinced that he can no longer be an MMA fighter. Back home his landlord kicks him out of his apartment since he can no longer pay the rent. Before leaving, Mike gives away his boxing gloves indicating that he has given up on trying to be a fighter again. He then drives away disappointed and seeks to find another job. In his job hunting quest, while living in his car, Mike gets a job at Castle Heights Hospital in the labor department. The scene switches to a middle-aged man, Erickson, living with his daughter, Emily. Emily suffers from blood cancer, and this worries Erickson, since it demands a lot of finance to cater for her medical expenses. Not long after, a woman who happens to be Emily's doctor comes to collect her payment from Erickson or suspend her daughter's treatment. However, Erickson does not have the money to pay the fees yet, while insisting that he is also waiting for his check from some insurance company. Erickson is a prison guard at Fordham Federal Prison. He then receives a call from the hospital telling him that Emily has to undergo chemotherapy, and that his health insurance does not cover it. Adding to his frustrations, Erickson is required to top up $400,000 for his daughter's medical expenses. He seems beaten with his situation while pondering how to raise the funds to pay for his daughter's treatment. In the next scene at Fordham Federal Prison, a prisoner named Lando gets into a confrontation with another prisoner named Damien. He asks about his money that was hidden by Lando. They then start fighting after Damien stabs Lando with a knife. At Castle Heights Hospital, Mike is seen to be in deep thought, probably wondering how fast his fate has shifted from a legendary MMA champion to a little wage employee. Their supervisor finds them chatting with his newfound friend, George. He reprimands them for neglecting their job and asks them to focus more on work since they have a deadline before Castle Heights building is demolished. Meanwhile, a mayor is seen making a statement in front of Castle Heights Hospital, and with him are reporters. He announces that the building will be toppled in the next 3 days, and that the land will be diverted for the construction of a new sports building. Lando was watching television at that time in a detention cell. Starts getting worried about the news he just heard. It turns out that Lando hid the stolen cash in Castle Heights Hospital since the building has been neglected for decades. Lando quickly asks to meet the chief warden, Erickson. In their meeting, Lando asks Erickson to transfer him to the southern prison block while offering him some money that he could use to pay for his daughter's treatment. Upon mentioning his daughter's situation, Erickson gets angry and attacks Lando. The next morning, Erickson secretly went to Lando and asked about the money, proving that his earlier actions were to confuse the other prison guards since they were on camera. Lando then reveals that the money he once robbed Damien, $3 million, is hidden in Castle Heights Hospital, which is about to be torn down. Lando insists that the money is his and would wish to help Erickson with it for his daughter's treatment. Lando's only request is to be moved to the South Block because he was always bullied by Damien and his henchmen there. Erickson agrees to the offer while the other prison guard, Walsh, turns out to be on Damien's side. Walsh reports to Damien and his henchmen that Lando has been transferred to the South Block. Upon hearing this, Damien deduces that Lando must have told Erickson where he is hiding money, considering that Erickson is desperately in need of it to fund his daughter's treatment. Damien quickly calls his brother, Deacon, and tells him to handle the matter. Damien is a drug dealer and now Deacon runs his drug business while he coordinates with him in prison. In some room as they wind up for the day, George says that Mike looks familiar and recognizes Mike as an MMA fighter. They start talking about their financial problems, where George explains his tight financial situation as a married man and a father of 2. Mike then affirms George's suspicion that he was an MMA fighter, but now he is bankrupt and forced to work anything to make a living. Meanwhile, Deacon and his wife, Kat, are monitoring the hospital building waiting for Erickson to lead them to where the money is hidden. It was about closing hours and some of the laborers are leaving the place. While moving things, George tells Mike that he dreams of moving to Alaska with his family and suggests Mike to leave with them. Mike, who was in a different room, bumped into 3 bags wrapped together with large sums of money. Their working hours is over and their supervisor asks them to leave. George calls him out and he quickly stashes the money back after taking a fairly bloodstained note and leaves. He plans to retrieve the bags containing the money after everyone is gone. Outside, he pretends that he has forgotten his jacket and rushes back in before giving George the fairly stained note to grab a beer. Deacon is preparing his henchmen to infiltrate the Castle Heights hospital building, while waiting for Erickson to arrive and lead them to where the money is stashed. Meanwhile, Erickson was already preparing to go to Castle Heights and collect the money. Before leaving, Erickson says goodbye to his daughter and tells her an urgent work came up. Mike enters the Castle Heights building, which has only 2 hours to be torn down to take the money. He is very cheerful to find out that the money is still there and they are all real cash. Instead of taking it and leave straight away, he takes his time to count the money, assuming that he is the only one who knows about it. On the other hand, Erickson is seen going into the same building by one of Deacon's men and informs his boss. Not long after, Deacon and his men enter the construction site but stopped after presenting fake papers to one of the guards. Kat immediately shoots the guard when he was trying to inform the authorities of their presence. It turns out that the guard recognizes her as a club dancer with the scar next to her mouth. Meanwhile, Erickson heads to the 6th floor according to the directions previously given by Lando. He sees the pile of explosives that will be used to tear down the building in the next 1 hour. Deacon and his armed men also run after him. They scattered around the building after losing Erickson's sight. Mike notices Erickson's presence in the next room, and rashly begins to put the money back in the bags. When Mike was about to descend the stairs, he sees Deacon's armed men and rushes back upstairs. Meanwhile, Erickson finds scattered notes on the floor and realizes that someone has taken the money. Shortly, he hears a clanging metal sound that Mike accidentally kicks while on the run. However, Erickson is not the only one who heard the sound, as Deacon and his men are already moving towards the sound. Though Deacon and his men think that the sound was made by Erickson, since they believe apart from them, it's only Erickson that would have known about the stashed cash. Upon realizing that they are also looking for the money, Mike immediately went into hiding. Just a single floor higher, Mike sees Erickson, who is also hiding from Deacon and his gang. Deacon and his men's attention is then distracted when George appears in the scene. George came looking for Mike since he took too long trying to find his said jacket. They arrested him while Kat searches him. She finds the fairly bloodstained note in George's pocket. Kat believes that George must be the one who took the money. Deacon and his gang then tortured him and forced George to reveal the money's whereabouts, even though George knew nothing about it. Mike is seeing this from his hiding place but could not help his friend, since George never gave them any information they were seeking for. Deacon orders his men to kill him. Mike sees this and accidentally makes a sound while revealing himself. Immediately, Deacon orders for his arrest and his men rushed upstairs for him. On the other hand, Mike seems very furious and guilty about his friend's death and decides to avenge by taking down Deacon and his men. He beats some of Deacon's men but gets caught with Kat and 2 other men. With guns pointed to his face, Mike surrenders and quickly one of the men notifies Deacon. When he learns from the call that Deacon wants him alive, he began fighting them and manages to escape through the garbage can. However, Erickson was already there and immediately caught Mike. With a knife placed on his throat, they hide from one of Deacon's men who was passing by. Erickson then threatens Mike with the knife still next to his throat and forces him to say where he hid the money. Mike argues that he is just a laborer and knows nothing about the money. Immediately Erickson lost his guard. Mike attacks him and the two began fighting before finally being stopped by one of Deacon's henchmen, who threatened the two at gunpoint. Mike and Erickson tried to calm him down and managed to hit the gun out of his hand before leaving him unconscious. However, while the two still struggle with who takes the gun, the other Deacon's men arrives after hearing the shooting. Mike and Erickson had no other choice but to flee from the scene. Deacon then orders his men to block access in and out of the building and then tries to make a deal with Mike to give up the money and that he will guarantee him his life. But who can give up $3 million just like that? Of course Mike ignores the offer and chose to fight Deacon's men. Mike is then cornered by Deacon's men from both sides in the building. He jumped out of the window with the help of a horse pipe he rolled out. Deacon and his henchmen keep shooting at him from below. He finally jumps in the next floor. But in the floor was Kat pointing a gun at him asking about the money. To his rescue, Erickson comes and throws a plunk that hits Kat, but on the verge of falling out through the window. Promptly without thinking, Deacon and his men start shooting. Unfortunately, he realizes when it's too late that his men helped him kill his wife quickly to reduce the expenses. Deacon is shattered to see his wife coming to where he is without resisting. She dies horribly after falling from a height. Deacon vows to guarantee Mike and Erickson's bodies be buried with the soon-to-be demolished building. On the other hand, Erickson ties Mike's injured arm to stop the bleeding while explaining how and why the money was hidden in the building. He then asks him about the money, but Mike asserts that he is just a mere laborer and knows nothing about it. Mike and Erickson then shoots other Deacon's men and took their gun. But when Erickson was about to pick the other gun, Mike points a gun at Erickson. He believes that Erickson must be one of Deacon's gang in disguise, to find out from him where he stashed the money. Erickson immediately refutes it and reveals that he is forced to do all this, since he desperately needs the money to treat his daughter. He adds that he has only two ways to help his daughter, either by staying in the building, until it's torn down so that his life insurance can cover for his daughter, or walk out of the building with enough money to pay for her medical expenses. Eventually, Mike believes Erickson, and via the walkie-talkie, he tells Deacon he has the money and that he should come personally and collect it from him upstairs. After that, Mike takes the money from where he stashed it and gives Erickson one of the bag full of cash. Since they were 3 bags and it was a total of $3 million in them, I assume each bag has $1 million. Erickson then tells Mike that they should leave the building immediately, since they have only 10 minutes remaining before the building is brought down. Mike tells him that Deacon still owes him for killing his friend George. It turns out that Mike has no idea the building will be blown that soon. Erickson assures Mike that Deacon and his men will die from the explosion, since the building has less than 10 minutes now. After thinking about this, he gives up on his course and intends to run away with Erickson. Meanwhile, the mayor and the other construction workers were preparing to tear down the Castle Heights building as the crowd watches. At the roof as they engage in a firefight, Mike is restrained from escaping as he tries to avoid Deacon's attack. Mike is forced to tell Erickson to go first without him while he fights Deacon alone, since he has someone to look after with the money. When Mike runs out of ammo, he throws some money to Deacon's face and hits the gun from his hand. As they get into a hand-to-hand combat, Deacon notices his wounded shoulder. Meanwhile, Erickson shoots the only remaining Deacon henchman and heads for an idle truck that was placed there earlier by Deacon and his gang. Mike, who is still at the rooftop, takes the remaining bag and manages to escape. With just 2 minutes left, he tries to quickly descend the stairs. Erickson sees him and tells him to jump behind the garbage truck. Deacon, on the other hand, collects the scattered cash from the remaining bag as he laughs. He still can't believe that fate was on his side this time, since everyone is dead and he has all the money to himself. The Castle Heights hospital finally starts going down while Erickson and Mike drives away from the collapsing building. Deacon, on the other hand, must have wished to be buried rich together with his wife. A few days later, Mike leaves some money at George's house doorstep for his family to help them deal with their financial problems after his death. After that, he drives away while looking at another job opening in Alaska. I believe he is probably heading there and thinks he might get another $3 million. In the final scene, Erickson moved Damien to the South Block, which turned out to be one of Lando's requests. And there we go, a punch from Lando to his face blacks us all out, marking the end of this movie. Subscribe for more scenes recap like this. Until next time, have a great day.